Just before dawn on February 27, 1945, the steel floor beneath Sergeant Robert Early's boots trembled as his tank idled in the darkness near the German town of Elsdorf west of Cologne. The air inside the turret smelled of hot oil, grease, and nervous sweat. Outside, frost clung to the bare branches and broken farm fences. Somewhere ahead, hidden among the ruins and muddy fields, German Panther tanks waited in ambush. Early and his crew had heard the stories for months. Too many American tankers had watched shells bounce harmlessly off Panther front armor. Too many Shermans had burned after one accurate German shot. But this morning was different. Robert Early was not sitting inside an ordinary Sherman.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Around him was nearly 50 tons of brand-new American steel. Its thick, sloped armor enclosed the crew like a moving fortress. Its 90mm gun could smash through German armor at ranges where many earlier American tanks struggled. The men had trained on it only weeks before. Now, in the cold gray light, they were about to learn whether this late-arriving machine could finally give them what every tanker wanted most, a fair fight. The tank was the M26 Pershing, though by the time it reached Europe the U.S. Army had reclassified it as a medium tank. To the men who climbed into it, official labels mattered far less than what the vehicle represented. For nearly 2 years, American armored crews had fought primarily in the M4 Sherman. The Sherman was dependable, easy to repair, and produced in enormous numbers. It carried Allied armies from North Africa to Germany. Yet by 1944, the battlefield had changed. German tanks such as the Panther tank and the Tiger I mounted more powerful guns and thicker armor. American crews often compensated with superior teamwork, artillery support, and air power. But inside each turret the fear was real. Every crew wanted a tank that could survive a direct duel. The story of the Pershing began years earlier, long before Robert Early's crew rolled toward Elsdorf. In 1942, American engineers at the Detroit Arsenal started studying what the next generation of tanks should look like. Combat reports from North Africa showed that tanks needed stronger guns and better protection. Early designs evolved through several experimental models, including the T-20, T-22, and T-23. These prototypes tested new transmissions, torsion bar suspension, and larger turrets. Engineers pushed the design further into the T-25 and then the T-26, which mounted the powerful 90mm M3 gun. This weapon had originally been developed as an anti-aircraft gun and adapted for tank combat. It fired armor-piercing rounds with enough force to defeat the most dangerous German tanks under favorable conditions. Yet the Pershing's road to combat was painfully slow. Inside the U.S. Army, there was disagreement over what a tank should do. Lieutenant General Leslie J. McNair believed tanks should exploit breakthroughs and that tank destroyers should handle enemy armor. Others argued that American crews needed a better armed tank immediately. Production concerns, shipping priorities, and fears about mechanical reliability caused further delays. Throughout 1944, as Allied tankers fought through Normandy, across France, and into Germany, many wondered why the United States still lacked a true answer to the Panther and Tiger. The battle reports were sobering. During the Normandy campaign in the summer of 1944, American tankers often faced Panthers hidden behind hedgerows. The Panther's long 75mm gun could penetrate a Sherman from well over 1,000 yards. Shermans usually needed to maneuver to the sides or call for support. Courage and skill frequently overcame these odds, but the cost was measured in burning tanks and lost crews. Men like Robert Early followed these stories closely. Every new rumor about a stronger American tank spread quickly through training camps and replacement depots. By late 1944, the pressure became impossible to ignore. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 showed that German armor remained dangerous even as the Third Reich weakened. In response, the Army rushed a small number of T26E3 tanks to Europe under a special program nicknamed Zebra Mission. 20 vehicles crossed the Atlantic in January 1945. They arrived with mechanics, spare parts, and technical experts because commanders wanted no delays. The war in Europe was entering its final months, but fierce fighting still lay ahead. The Rhine River remained uncrossed. German cities were fortified. Panthers and Tigers continued to strike from concealed positions. The Pershing had arrived late, but it had arrived in time to prove itself. When Robert Early and his crew first saw their new tank, they understood immediately that this machine was different. The Pershing sat lower and looked more aggressive than the Sherman. Its rounded cast turret was broad and imposing. The front hull armor was thick and sharply sloped, increasing its effective protection. Inside, the torsion bar suspension provided a steadier ride over rough ground. The 90mm gun dominated the turret. Each armor-piercing shell was large, heavy, and reassuring. For the gunner, the telescopic sight offered a clear view of the target. For the loader, every round felt like a chance to survive. The Pershing was not perfect. Its Ford gaff engine, the same basic power plant used in some Shermans, had to move a much heavier vehicle. On steep grades and muddy roads, the tank could feel underpowered. Maintenance crews worked constantly to keep transmissions and final drives functioning. But none of those concerns mattered as much to frontline crews as the simple fact that they could now face a Panther with confidence instead of dread. At Elsdorf, that confidence was tested almost immediately. On February 27, 1945, elements of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division attacked toward Cologne. German defenders included Panther tanks positioned to cover roads and open approaches. In one of the best-known early Pershing actions, a T26E3 nicknamed Fireball advanced with supporting tanks and infantry. Near the town, a concealed Panther opened fire. The shell struck the Pershing near the mantlet and penetrated, killing the gunner and wounding others. It was a harsh reminder that no tank was invincible. Thick armor improved survival, but the battlefield remained unforgiving. The crew's experience reflected a truth every tanker understood. Armor and firepower reduced risk, but training and awareness remained essential. In the cramped interior, each man depended completely on the others. The driver steered through shell holes and rubble. The gunner tracked fleeting targets through smoke. The loader wrestled heavy rounds into the breach. The commander scanned for threats and made split-second decisions. Survival was always a team effort. The Pershing's most famous moment came a few days later in Cologne. On March 6, 1945, combat cameramen recorded one of the clearest tank versus tank engagements of the war. A Pershing named Eagle 7, commanded by Sergeant Early, moved cautiously through the shattered streets near the city's great cathedral, Cologne Cathedral. Buildings stood in ruins, broken glass covered the roads, smoke drifted between stone facades. Hidden nearby was a Panther commanded by a young German officer. The Panther had already destroyed an American Sherman. It waited at an intersection, partially concealed by debris. Early's Pershing edged forward. Gunner Corporal Clarence Smoyer spotted the German tank. The range was short, roughly a few hundred yards. Smoyer fired. The first shot struck, but did not immediately destroy the Panther. He fired again. Then, a third round hit. Flames erupted from the German tank as ammunition ignited. The Panther burned fiercely in the street while the Pershing reversed into cover. For American tankers watching the film later, the scene was unforgettable. Here was a U.S. tank confronting a Panther frontally in a direct duel and winning decisively. The Pershing did not need to circle behind. It did not need tank destroyers or fighter bombers to finish the job. In one brief exchange, the psychological balance changed. Crews who had long approached German armor with caution now felt they possessed a machine that could dominate the fight. The duel in Cologne did not mean every Pershing effortlessly defeated every German tank. Combat was more complicated than any single film clip. Shot angle, range, ammunition quality, crew skill, and sheer luck all mattered. Panthers remained deadly. Tiger II tanks carried even thicker armor and more powerful guns. But the Pershing gave American crews a level of protection and firepower they had not previously enjoyed in large numbers. Clarence Smoyer later recalled the emotional impact of serving in the Pershing. Like many tankers, he knew what it felt like to face superior enemy guns. The Pershing changed that feeling. Instead of wondering whether their shells would bounce, crews believed they could hit first and hit hard. That confidence affected how they maneuvered, how they engaged targets, and how they endured the constant pressure of armored combat. The tank's 90mm gun was the heart of that confidence. Firing armor-piercing and high-velocity rounds, it was capable of defeating Panthers and Tigers at practical combat ranges. The large gun also delivered powerful high-explosive shells against buildings, anti-tank guns, and infantry positions. In urban fighting across Western Germany, this versatility mattered enormously. One moment the gunner might engage a hidden anti-tank gun in a second-story window. The next, he might face a tank at the far end of a street. The Pershing's armor also improved crew survival. The mantlet around the gun offered substantial protection. The sloped glacis increased the chance of deflecting incoming rounds. Inside, the larger turret provided somewhat better working space for the crew. These features did not eliminate danger, but they improved the odds. For tankers who had seen friends lost in thinner armored vehicles, that difference was deeply personal. As Allied armies pushed toward the Rhine in March 1945, more Pershings joined the fight. They supported infantry attacks, engaged strong points, and dueled German armor. Near the Battle of Remagen, American forces captured the Ludendorff Bridge intact, opening a path across the Rhine. Heavy fighting followed as German artillery and counterattacks attempted to destroy the bridgehead. Pershings were among the armored vehicles helping secure the area and expand the Allied foothold east of the river. One Pershing, nicknamed Super Pershing, became legendary. This modified T26E3 carried an even longer 90mm gun with improved armor penetration. Additional armor plates were welded to the front for extra protection. In April 1945, near Dessau, the vehicle reportedly destroyed a German heavy tank, often identified as a Tiger II, at long range. Historians continue to debate some details, but the episode added to the Pershing family's reputation as America's ultimate wartime tank. For the ordinary crews, however, the real story was less about legends and more about daily survival. Tank warfare was exhausting. Men slept in short bursts, often inside or beneath their vehicles. They ate cold rations while engines idled. Mud coated their boots and uniforms. Every village could hide a Panzerfaust team. Every tree line might conceal an anti-tank gun. The Pershing did not remove these dangers, but it gave crews a stronger shield and a more powerful sword. Private first-class loaders often remembered the physical strain. A 90mm round was heavy, and in combat the loader had to work rapidly in a confined space while the tank lurched over broken ground. Drivers wrestled with narrow roads and shell craters. Radio operators maintained contact with nearby units while manning the bow machine gun. Commanders stood half-exposed in their cupolas, scanning for movement and making decisions that affected every life in the tank. The German reaction was immediate and practical. Experienced Panzer crews quickly recognized that this was not just another Sherman. The Pershing's silhouette was larger and more angular. Its gun was noticeably heavier. When frontal shots failed to produce easy kills, German commanders adjusted tactics, seeking side shots and closer ambush positions. That response itself was telling. The Pershing had forced the enemy to treat American armor with greater caution. Still, the Pershing arrived in very small numbers. Fewer than 24 reached Europe before combat began, and only a limited number saw action before Germany surrendered in May 1945. This was not a war-winning tank in the sense of overwhelming production. That role remained with the Sherman, whose reliability and numbers were indispensable. Instead, the Pershing symbolized what American industry and engineering had achieved by the war's end, a tank fully capable of meeting the best German designs on equal terms. On April 1, 1945, as Allied forces advanced deeper into Germany, many Pershing crews had already formed a strong attachment to their vehicles. They trusted the thick armor in ways that bordered on instinct. When rounds struck and failed to penetrate, the impact was felt in every bone. But the crew remained alive. In tank warfare, survival after the first hit could mean the difference between victory and catastrophe. The emotional effect of that survivability cannot be overstated. American tankers had long relied on doctrine, support, and courage to overcome technical disadvantages. The Pershing changed the mental equation. It reduced the sense of vulnerability that haunted many crews. Commanders could engage dangerous targets with more confidence. Gunners could take deliberate shots. Drivers could advance knowing their armor offered a better chance against the enemy's best weapons. Yet the Pershing also arrived with a touch of tragedy. Many crews who would have benefited from its protection had already fought and died in earlier campaigns. Veterans understood this better than anyone. Some wondered quietly how many friends might have survived had the tank reached Europe in mid-1944 instead of early 1945. There is no precise answer, but the question lingered long after the war. By mid-April, organized German resistance was collapsing in many sectors. Columns of prisoners filled the roads. Town after town surrendered. Even so, dangerous pockets remained. Fanatical defenders still used anti-tank weapons from cellars and rubble. Pershings continued to support infantry in these final operations, smashing roadblocks and covering advances through devastated cities. On May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day brought the fighting to an end. Engines that had roared across muddy fields and shattered streets finally fell silent. Crews climbed out of their tanks into a world transformed. Some celebrated. Others thought of the men who were missing. For Pershing crews, there was also a quiet sense of pride. They had operated one of the most formidable tanks fielded by the United States during the war. The Pershing service did not end in Europe. After World War II, the design continued to evolve and influenced later American tanks. During the Korean War, Pershings returned to combat against North Korean armor and fortified positions. Lessons learned from the M26 contributed directly to successors such as the M26 Patton and later the broader Patton series, which shaped U.S. armored doctrine for decades. Historians still debate whether the Pershing should have been introduced earlier and in greater numbers. Some argue that mechanical concerns and logistical realities justified caution. Others believe the Army delayed too long because of doctrinal assumptions. What is beyond dispute is that once the Pershing reached the battlefield, it proved that American designers had created a tank that could stand toe-to-toe with Germany's most feared armored vehicles. The phrase that it immediately humbled every Panzer it faced captures the emotional truth more than a literal one. No tank wins every engagement. War is too chaotic for absolute claims. But from Elsdorf to Cologne and beyond, the Pershing changed the expectations of both sides. American crews felt more secure and more aggressive. German crews encountered an opponent they could no longer dismiss as just another Sherman. For Sergeant Robert Early and men like Clarence Smoyer, the Pershing was more than steel, horsepower, and ballistics tables. It was a machine that restored confidence after years of hard fighting. It was the sound of a 90mm gun firing with decisive force. It was armor thick enough to absorb a hit that might once have been fatal. Most of all, it was the feeling that for the first time the odds inside the turret had shifted. Imagine the scene one last time. Dawn light spreads over a ruined German street. The tank engine rumbles beneath the crew's boots. The gunner peers through his sight. The commander scans the rubble ahead. Somewhere in the distance, a Panther waits. For months, that silhouette inspired fear. But now the men inside the Pershing do not feel outmatched. They know their gun can penetrate. They trust their armor. They believe they can survive. That belief is why the Pershing earned such a powerful reputation. It arrived late, when the war in Europe was nearly over. It served in limited numbers. It was not perfect. Yet to the crews who fought in it, the M26 Pershing represented the American tank they had been waiting for all along. In the final months of World War II, it gave U.S. armored soldiers something priceless: the confidence to face any Panzer on equal terms and, more often than not, emerge victorious.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.